There's a term you've been using recently that I'd love for you to talk about for our audience, and that is climate barbarism. Can you tell us what that's about?
Right. So I guess I would just say that we've spent a lot of time focusing over the years on the fact that on the right side of the political spectrum, there's a lot of denying of the science of climate change, and that is certainly true. But I think what we're starting to see is that the only thing more frightening than a sort of unhinged right-wing racist movement that denies the scientific reality of climate change is an unhinged far-right racist movement that no longer denies the reality of climate change and starts using the climate crisis as a rationale for waging war on immigrants, fortressing borders, and as a justification for why it is okay to allow huge swaths of humanity to die where they are. And this is what we are starting to see at the fringe of the fringe with the El Paso killer who went to Walmart and said he was, basically going to hunt immigrants because they can't have the American way of life. I mean, he said, we know that not everybody can have our way of life. So he went to Walmart to kill immigrants because of that. I mean, it's just extraordinary. And he was taking inspiration from a mass murderer in New Zealand who went to 2 mosques on March 15th. And that killer identified himself as an ethno-nationalist, eco-fascist. Once again, in his manifesto, he talked about his environmental concerns, and he saw immigration as an environmental threat to the white Christian world. So we are already starting to see this absolutely toxic intersection of fears of economic of ecological breakdown, resource scarcity, and white supremacy mixing together to create what I'm calling climate barbarism.
And I think a great example of that sort of process, and an example, by the way, that the damage that's going to be done by climate change is not something that's 20 years away or 50 years away. We're experiencing it right now. I don't know if you saw the report that something like 7 million climate refugees had been motivated to move just through the course of this year so far.
Yeah, I did see that in the first 6 months of 2019, 7 million people have already been displaced. We're seeing it in real time in the Bahamas. Hundreds of thousands of Puerto Ricans and also reportedly were forced to leave the island. In every case, it isn't one simple driver, right? I mean, in the case of Puerto Rico, you have this toxic intersection of legacy, the legacy of colonialism, decades of economic austerity, intersecting with heavy weather linked to the climate crisis that creates this complete system failure, and people feel forced to leave their homes, and then come up against these governments like the Trump administration, who are using the fact that their base knows whether or not they claim to deny climate change or not. They know that we are in a period of mass migration, that it isn't going to end. And they're using people's fears of the other, of this feeling of a sort of an imminent invasion to build their political project. And so this is why, when we think about the urgency of a Green New Deal, we're not just fighting for a habitable planet, we're fighting for our humanity on a habitable planet, because we are at this fork in the roads where we have to decide, given that the climate shocks are already upon us, are we going to hoard, fortress, lock out, leave to drown, or are we going to reckon with the fact that that we live in an interdependent, interconnected world, and we have to find a way to share our remaining resources inside our countries and between our countries, which is why, as I said, I think it is so important to talk about what are our international responsibilities in the face of the climate crisis, not only our national responsibilities.
The book, which I can't wait to read, is out today. It's On Fire, The Burning Case for a Green New Deal. Naomi Klein, as always, thank you for joining us on The Damage Report.
Thank you for having me.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.